you guys, I'm here in my greenhouse letting my indoor sown seedlings get a little bit of extra sun, and I wanted to share with you something that is a little bit of a hiccup in the seedlings that I've grown for celery. I've actually had a little bit of a fail, and I would say that this is probably the result 90% sure of user error. I wanted to share with you what I felt like I did wrong and what corner I ended up cutting, because this question that I'm going to answer today is one that I get a lot when it comes to indoor seed starting, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of a demonstration of why cutting this particular corner actually didn't work out for me. The question I get asked is, can I not sow my seedlings in a larger container than these small little 6-pack cell trays? Can I just go ahead and plant them in a larger container, whatever I want them to grow in later? Why do I have to do the extra step of potting up? I talked about how to pot up in this video and different ways that you can pot up, and I found that potting up actually is really good for seedlings because you're starting them out in a small cell or a soil block, and then you gradually put them up to containers that they can end up growing and spreading their roots inside. But potting up is definitely an extra step, and I'm all about cutting corners and eliminating unnecessary labor. And why can't we just start the seedlings in the cell that we want them to grow in the first place? Well, I decided to do that myself with the celery this year because I did want to eliminate the extra step of potting up, especially when it came to celery. But I was also going against my best judgment because I was afraid that something might happen, and it ended up happening. So let me tell you a little bit about celery. Celery is a cool season crop, and it takes a long time to grow. It takes longer to sprout than other seeds like tomatoes and peppers. I don't know, peppers take a little while too, but broccoli, cabbage, things like that, lettuce, they sprout really fast. Celery does not sprout as fast, and then it grows very slowly. So I decided that I wanted to just go ahead and start these celery seeds in these Epic cell trays. These are the 4-packs, which I absolutely love. I use them in with so many other crops. But I was a little bit nervous about starting them in such big containers. But because I knew that they are such slow growing, I knew that if I could just get them started and get them healthy, this would actually work out well because I wouldn't need to pot up. They could grow in these containers until I put them in the garden. And so I thought, let's just try it and eliminate that extra step of potting up. That's what I did. But here's the concern with starting a plant like celery, and any plant that honestly just takes a long time to grow, starting it in a too large of cell. The problem comes in with water and being able to regulate the soil moisture. What ended up happening with my seedlings is I had a really hard time keeping the soil moist enough but not too saturated. Because if the soil is too saturated, number one, the seeds could rot in the soil before they even get a chance to sprout. Number two is if they do start sprouting and they start developing roots, if those roots can't take up the amount of moisture that's needed to keep the soil saturated, if they can't take it up in time, that could cause root rot. So there's really this delicate balance of making sure that the soil is just saturated enough but not too wet. With a seedling like celery that grows so slowly, it's really hard to keep that soil at that perfect level because those roots are not taking up the moisture. And so what ends up happening is the soil can get too dry or it can get too wet, and it's hard to keep it at that happy place. What ended up happening for me was that once the celery seedlings started to germinate, it actually happened to be a really busy time in my life. It was a week that we were launching my online garden planning course, Dream to Garden, back in February, and so I was really focused on that. My daughter had basketball tournaments and basketball practices, just a really busy time. So honestly, I did not pay as good of attention to this as I should have. And so a lot of these seedlings ended up dying because I didn't water enough. Yet, if you look here at some of these cells, you can see that there's some mold that's forming on the top. That's because when I decided to, oh shoot, I need to water these, there was too much water. And so when you get too much water in the soil, that mold will happen, and then the seedling really struggles. If the seed hadn't germinated yet, it could prevent germination. It's just not a good thing to do. So as you can see here, I have lost probably about half of my celery seedlings, no matter what variety they were. The little empty spots here are, you can see there's some dead seedlings here because they didn't get enough water. Thankfully, I caught it in time where they didn't all die, and so I did add some more water, so I do have some pretty healthy sprouts growing here. But obviously I wanted all of these to actually have celery. So now what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to do something a little bit different because I do have a couple of these cells here that have 2 seedlings here. Celery is pretty easy to be able to transplant and to separate, so I'm going to actually separate these and hopefully be able to get all of these to be able to continue to live to get the amount of celery that I want for the year. So I think I'm going to be able to salvage what didn't die here, but obviously that was not the goal. The goal was to have this whole flat of cells to be full of celery because I try to grow as much celery as I can in my garden, enough to last our family all year. This is obviously a setback for me right now. Now, I will say that celery is one that, like I said, it grows really slowly. So if I had had it to do over again, I would have planted it here in these smaller cell trays. This is from Epic Gardening. I love these sturdy trays. These are also from Epic Gardening. They both are, but they are both different sizes. I would have started them in this size because you can see these cells are smaller and it would have been so much easier to regulate the moisture better. And then once they actually developed the root system that covered the inside of here, I probably would have potted them up into this size, because this size is actually a good size for celery. It just didn't work out to start it out here. That would have been able to regulate the water so much better, is to start it in the small one and then pot them up to that. Now, I mentioned that celery in particular grows very slowly, and that's something that I would recommend that you consider if you want to grow anything in a cell about this big or even larger. Consider how fast the plant is going to grow. I have successfully sown tomato seeds directly in these, and they've done fantastic. The difference is that tomato seeds germinate faster, and once they germinate, they grow so much faster. So starting tomato seeds in these big ones is actually a great idea. And then sometimes I do have to end up potting these up from here to a larger pot before I can put them in the ground. As you can see a theme here, to be able to successfully sow a lot of seeds indoors and then wait until it's time to put them out into the garden, potting up is often not only good for the plant, but a lot of times it's necessary because we don't want the plant to start out in a cell that's too big and you have problems with maintaining water, but you also don't want to keep the plant in a cell that it's outgrown. So those are the main reasons why potting up is such a beneficial thing when you're starting seeds indoors. So hopefully my experience here has helped you to maybe avoid the mistake that I made this year. Like I said, I kind of knew better, but I was just trying to see if I could cut one extra step, and in this case, it just didn't work for me. Of course, every indoor seed starter has their own method, and obviously the methods that I use are ones that I've learned over the years and work well for me. You may determine that there's a different method that you like better, but I definitely wanted to share this with you so you could see in real time what ended up happening when, number one, I planted in a cell that was too large for the seed that I was planting, and number two, when I let life get in the way and I wasn't able to maintain the soil moisture well. And hopefully by seeing my experience, you can learn something and maybe prevent the same thing from happening to you. I hope that this little tip was helpful for you, and I'll be sharing more along my garden journey this year, both the successes and both the failures, and I hope that it helps you in your garden journey as well. Make sure to like if you like this video and subscribe for even more, and I'll see you again next week.